intricacies. The way we're doing the planning from a policing perspective is a roadside screening test that we'll be able to test for people who have been impaired by drug roadside. We currently don't have that technology, and we're told that we will have that in our hands by the time that this happens this fall. So that I know there's a lot of work being done on background on that through our national headquarters. So from us, I actually don't see a lot of change. I don't think that we're going to see a substantial increase. I think what we're allowing ourselves to do now is have the conversation above table.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
The first one is just sort of a statistical one. We are a community under 5,000. Do you simply use the census data to determine that?
Yeah, so that's done by the province of BC through census data. And then once the census shows that you're getting close to 5,000, they begin to engage your community in discussions around, hey, you're nearing that 5,000 mark. And by the next census, it looks like you might go over. Therefore, you've got a 4-year period to plan for the finances around what it would cost to then pay for 70% of your policing. Because when you're between 5,000 and 15,000, you pay for 70% of your policing. If you opt with the RCMP, and 30% of it is paid for by the or by the province. If you went for your own municipal police force at the 5,000 mark, then you pay for 100% of your policing costs.
So the seasonal influx of summer visitors has no impact on that?
Great question, because Winter, I did this earlier. Whistler is one of the communities I police, and we deal with seasonal influx in probably the greatest magnitude in the province. And no, we go straight from census data, and that is that's a provincial contract clause in there. And so certainly we have our in my discussions with our finance planner. So once you hit 5,000, I would have a very good relationship with your CAO and CFO in order to discuss budget and budget cycles for you. And so I go into budget meetings and I say, hey, you're a community that deals with a significant increase in population in the summer. We need to start planning some of that into our policing costs. So that would be times when you would start having to look at those tourism dollars and putting some of that money towards policing.
Okay. Yeah. And then my second question, I didn't quite understand when you said that there was, this is in the domestic violence discussion, you said there was a mismatch between the reports and the actual statistics. What do you mean?
So the number of reports that the police receive, so our police data, which is where you'll see the crime trends are taken from our police data, versus, and I can't off the top of my head remember the name of the survey that I read, and it was within the last 5 years, but it's a national survey that was, have you been exposed to domestic violence in your house? Have you reported to the police? And it extracts the difference between reported violence to the police and in this anonymous form, violence. Actual violence, thank you, that's what I was looking for, actual. So just showing to us barriers in reporting. We know that there's a significant barrier of reporting to the police when it comes to domestic violence or interpersonal violence. Violence in relationships is always for us about forming relationships, but also going through some of our third party. We're exploring some different, we have a project up in Whistler has actually been one of the BC named communities to be a pilot project on third party reporting, which the police have typically not received third party reports of violence, and now we are accepting those through this pilot project.
And then my last question, it's not really a question, it's more of a comment. The Economic Development Committee has been hosting a series of business breakfasts with different sectors of our community, and recently in the meetings with the retail businesses, there was a concern raised about shoplifting.
Yeah.
And from that meeting, it looks as though there was some follow-up done with Paulo. And I really appreciate some of the statistics here. The fact that there were 15 shoplifting cases reported in the last 12 years really puts that in context. So thank you for following up on that, Paulo.
And Paula was sharing with me some of the work that there is being done in the community between the police and businesses on shoplifting, and so they've gone into the businesses to work with them on what we can do to address some of the issues where there is shoplifting, and how can we help the businesses become informed on preventative measures, etc.
Thank you.
Okay. Melanie, did you have anything?
My question was more along the lines of the legalization of cannabis, and I think you did a really good job at sort of talking about some of the things that you're going to be.
I might have more information in the winter report as well, if you guys have me back, but on how things are going with the rollout, et cetera.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're in the early stages, and that's what I have at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just, well, thank you very much for all you do, and we don't see a lot of what you do, which brings up a point that there used to be, in the newspaper, we used to have just sort of a police report every, I don't know, every month or something like that, just to say what was going on in the neighborhood and this and that, and what the different infractions might have been. I think they used to have names in there, or maybe not, but that was a little bit over the top. But yeah, we just, it sets a really nice feel of decorum
Yeah.
in the community, and that's one thing we don't, it's just something that's understated, but just the presence itself does, and we thank you for everything you do, Paul. Yeah.
We were just having a discussion this morning about the value of having a media relations trained police officer here in the community, so that we could work maybe with a local Facebook or Twitter account and try and build that there's a lot of stipulations for the police on those accounts in terms of 24/7 monitoring and all of these kind of things. So unique to this community, that would be a challenge, but not one that we're not exploring. So we were just having a discussion this morning about what that could look like for Bowen Island. So I understand that in this community, one of the challenges the police have seen is following along, and the police often read the Facebook chatter online and the Twitter chatter, et cetera, and that information that is being put, and I throw this out there for community discussion just because it is really important, but the information that is being discussed on Facebook does not necessarily mirror the information that the police are receiving in their investigative reports, which are first-hand witness accounts, statements taken from people on scene, victim and physical evidence. And the information and the opinions and the conclusions that are being formed by community members are not necessarily accurate with what we're seeing with the police investigative report and what will be forwarded through to the courts. And so I say that in that it's really important that we rely on some of those media reports that are done, those actual one-off accounts that are put out in the local newspaper on the what's happening for this investigative file, and refer back to that. Okay, the police are investigating and looks at this point like this person's arrested, and to be arrested you need to have reasonable and probable grounds and evidence to get to that point of an arrest. And so it's just something to be mindful of as we move forward, and we're looking at how we can better inform the community on things that are happening and get involved in some of these community discussions that are happening, knowing that some of them are happening online, and how do we be involved in them, getting the right information out there and the accurate information out there.
Reminds me of the saying of now defunct judge, or no longer with us judge. They opened their mouths with their minds totally devoid of the facts. And hence my dislike of talk shows and things like that. The cannabis and the smoking bylaws, would it behoove us to have a smoking bylaw in your opinion?
If I was a community decision maker around smoking, I would certainly have a smoking bylaw, and it would be in areas that are impacted by the public, and not only for marijuana, but for cigarettes, right? To me, that is it's a public use and enjoyment space, right? And it also allows us to control some environments. So where you have people openly smoking, I think it impacts the people beside you. Whereas you have somebody who's, some of this is going to become really challenging as we move forward, because smoking is going to be permitted in the most recent regulations, but edibles and CBD oil and those kind of things are still coming down the road, is what I understand. So these situations are going to be challenging and interesting as we kind of navigate through them as they unfold, but I think that would really benefit your community. You think about just something like a cafe on the main street, and somebody's sitting outside at the picnic tables and they're smoking beside the family that's just having a cup of coffee. How does that impact them? And maybe it won't. Maybe we'll find that people will be more respectful and just move on, and that's great.
So if we had, who enforces those things?
Do you have a community bylaw officer?
Okay.
So that would be the first point of contact, and at any point that they needed some assistance and needed to partner with the police, then we would be partnering with
So
them.
hopefully a smoking bylaw and some signs up might deter a lot of people, but.
And I would assume in your community charter, the police are also able to enforce your bylaws.
Yeah.
So we would
It's
work in
like our
cooperation with them.
anti-idling bylaw that not everybody respects.
Yeah, so it would be a partnership between the bylaw officer and the RCMP.
Okay, well, thanks, everybody. Just one thing, just to emphasize, maybe I personally think that probably the biggest challenge we have is the social media piece and the need for the police to be able to respond quickly to these conversations that are getting out of control. Right? We don't have very much serious crime here, but when we do, people go wild on social media. The amount of incorrect and false information is staggering. And I appreciate the challenge from your perspective, but if you do have communications people available to you who can quickly respond in a sort of a very flat, neutral way to bring things under control, I think that would be something you could really be helpful to us with that. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you.
We'll follow up on
Thank
those
you.
pieces too.
Yeah, thank you.
For her. Thank you guys.
Thank you. Oh, where's Dave hiding? Where is he? Just gonna follow, thank you. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Not going to speak quite as fast as the last.
Come on.
Hopefully-
Practice.
My presentation today is to ask your approval for a community-built cob bus shelter project. It's a joint project of the Bowen Island Arts Council and Bowen in Transition. And basically what we are asking your permission to do is to build a beautiful cob bus shelter at Cove Commons. It will be constructed in accordance with TransLink standards. It will have a roof. I'll show you a couple of examples of what it might look like in a moment. A roof, 3 walls and benches will accommodate up to 10 people. We will decorate it with artwork by Bowen artists. We will make sure that the foundation and framing is professionally done and an engineer will sign it off. And the most exciting part is that the cob walls and the bench will be done by our community members of all ages under the direction and supervision of the Mud Girls. They just published a book, which I have a copy of, but I wasn't able to bring it because everybody wants to borrow it. They've been operating for a number of years. They are extremely professional. They do outstanding work, and their stuff is renowned all over the area. So the advantage of this is that this will be a community driven project, and that's where the magic in it lies. So the benefits, obviously, it'll provide some shelter from the weather. It will showcase natural building options and techniques, and our plan is to do this in conjunction with Bowen in Transition's annual sustainability tour or biannual sustainability tour. So what the theme of next year's sustainability tour will be is alternative natural building techniques, and there's quite a few on Bowen Island that have been used. So we'll be driving people around and showing them this, and they'll be able to get their hands involved in this, in the actual construction, and then following it, in the 2 weeks following it, there is going to be a workshop. One of the property owners on Bowen Island is actually having the Mud Girls do a workshop where they're going to build a tiny house on Bowen Island. So people that want to learn more about these kinds of techniques will have a chance to get involved in that as well. It will showcase artistry from Bowen Islanders right in the front of the gallery. We'll be able to learn some new skills, and the most important thing is we'll be able to, and this, I've had experience with this, it's just magic to be able to have kids, going by and say to their visiting grandparents, look, Grandpa, we did that. It's really an important part, I think, of growing up. And even adults who think that they can't do anything with their hands will say, look, we did that. It's an enormous benefit to the community. The timeline is, the Mud Girls have confirmed they're available for the project in August. It would be the latter part of August. We don't have an exact day yet. They have confirmed that they can meet TransLink specifications with that, which we've been working with Emma, and the municipal staff have confirmed that it will work with the entire Cardena Road project, the timeline and the project work to be done with that. Tina, on behalf of the library, has given us a letter of support. It should meet TransLink requirements for them to fully fund it. Bowen and Transition is going to backstop any costs that are not covered by that. So the plan would be that in the spring, the foundation and framing would be done, and the actual workshop would be 3 days in August of next year. In terms of its conformance to municipal plans, the bus shelter is part of the Bowen Transportation Plan, element 10, and encouraging alternative transportation is part of policy 30 of the OCP. The project is consistent with the goals and the timeline of the Cardena Road improvements. The project budget is $7,000, and that includes framing, roofing materials, and the training and supervision by the Mud Girls. And the Arts Council may decide to also pay a commission for art for the face of the shelter. We have some high-level specs from the process of getting more detailed specifications, so we have a series of drawings from the Mud Girls to scale. We have obtained from TransLink all of the requirements in terms of setbacks and widths and requirements for construction. And we have also been through in detail the Cardena plans in terms of exactly what will be in place. And we're convinced that we'll be able to have those all working together. This is an example of a Powell Rivers Cobb bus shelter. Ours is going to be a little fancier than this in that it will have walls on the side and back, but it won't be as fancy as this. In May of this year, New Westminster unveiled as part of its program an extremely fancy bus shelter. So we're going to try and find a sweet spot in between the Powell River one, which is probably not enough to shelter people from the elements in our winters, and but we're not aiming for anything quite this fancy. So next steps, if you are in approval, is to work with the municipality to make sure that we're coordinated with the Cardena improvements and that they're on schedule, and if they fall behind schedule, we'll have to adjust ours. But the project qualifies for TransLink funding, and that the bus bay and foundation, which is part 5 of the Cardena improvements, are in place in time for the shelter construction. We will be finalizing the budget, schedule, and work plan with the Mud Girls within the next month or so. What we haven't decided is whether or not the framing will be done by them or by local contractors. I don't have a strong preference one way or the other, so I think what we probably will do is find out if there are local contractors who'd like to do the work. And if they would like to do the work, we'll have the local people do it first. And if we can't find anybody that will do it for the kind of budget that the Mud Girls will do it for, then we'll get them to do it. And we will be starting to publicize the workshop and engage the community in this, both in terms of the idea of the project and actually inviting people to the workshop to get them involved on a very hands-on basis. And we will be reporting on a regular basis on the progress of the project and communicating our findings. That's it. Any questions?
Start Sue Ellen.
Well, thank you. It sounds like a very creative approach to utilitarian kind of thing like a bus shelter, which I think we do need there. My question relates to Remembrance Day and the parade at Bowfest and the kind of use that Cardena Corners area has as a kind of public square with the cenotaph and the ability to gather so many people together for ceremony. And I'm just wondering if, I was wondering if it could be, if this had been part of the decision about the walls. Because I can see, I had been envisioning something kind of transparent so that people could see through it and people could stand and because that area there has a, we don't really have a public open space plan. And I'm afraid, as a member of the library board, I've seen a number of requests and options, and I'm not speaking for the library board, but just over the years, we've seen sculptures appeal here, and people want to put kiosks and signs and events happen, and it's, we just don't have a plan. So I just wonder if you, but thinking about that, public open space, the Remembrance Day.
Well, Cove Commons, my understanding is Cove Commons does have a plan for the development of the whole area here.
Yeah.
And the bus shelter is a pretty small part of that. I don't think the fact that it's opaque is actually going to be kind of blocking.
How big is it? I see 10 people.
The minimum size is 3 meters by 8 meters, and I believe ours will be slightly larger than that, but not significantly. So it's basically 10 people standing up.
Right.
I can't remember how much the seating is. I think it depends on exactly how large we want to make the bench. So it's not going to be an imposing structure by any stretch. But I think it's a good point, but I think that point needs to be raised as part of the decision as to how that whole outdoor area outside the Cove Commons is going to be developed. And I understand they're still at fairly early stages in that, but I can certainly pass along to them your request.
That would be great. It's just a thinking about the bigger picture kind of idea.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, okay, I'm gonna go to Melanie and then Allison, okay?
So I really love this. I think this is sort of the missing piece on the corner there. So I'm really happy you're bringing this forward. So thank you very much. And it's great to hear that you've already liaised with staff in regards to qualifying for TransLink funding, because reading through their requirements, there's quite a few. So my question though is, I love it, the fact that it's organic, it really fits with sort of the Bowen ethos and everything. But in regards, I was just questioning, how have you given any thought to integrating sort of technology, lighting, and the fact that TransLink is really going in terms of technology driven? We've perhaps got a dynamic bus shuttle coming through, which will be sort of more app-based. So has there even been thought about how to integrate technology display, like the electronic display signs or things like that? Because this will be the gateway. This bus stop is really the gateway to transit on the island. So there needs to be some sort of marriage between those two. So that's my question.
We haven't thought about it so far. Our main concern has been the fact that there is, even for small bus shelters like this, there is a very onerous set of requirements for people who are visually or physically handicapped. And our priority has been making sure that we meet those requirements. But it raises the interesting question as to whether, Bowen and Transition is very much for resilient and sustainable construction. So maybe there's the possibility that we could introduce some kind of solar into this as a means of kind of showcasing technology and reinforcing this idea of sustainability. So I don't know whether it will fit within the budget, but I'm certainly willing to explore it.
It might not be something that we, that can be incorporated right now, but maybe just sort of thinking about how it can be future-proof. So as
Sure.
TransLink goes along sort of that line of becoming more technology-based, it can be at some point integrated into. So I think the idea of, solar panels and.
I know they're also moving to the idea of having the digital readouts that will show you when the bus is due.
That's the sort of thing I'm
Yes.
thinking about, and how do we incorporate that into
Yeah.
this type of design?
Well, when we're talking to TransLink, we'll ask them about that, because that's their technology. There's no reason why it wouldn't be compatible with this. The question is, how are we going to power it? And again, that's a question I guess we'll have to figure out with Cove Commons, what would be involved in running power to it from the Cove Commons. Thanks.
Just a quick question. I think we do need a bus shelter there, and it's not going to be entirely enclosed. I mean,
Right, it's going to be enclosed on 3 sides.
but all the way to the ceiling, or just part way out?
I'm not entirely sure.
Just thinking of a safety perspective, I think people would prefer to have a little bit of translucency or openness, and that's probably in TransLink specs too, because I've never seen a bus shelter that's, floor to ceiling, fuller roof walls.
Right. Most of them are glass, and
Yeah.
most of them are glass, and they have an opening at the bottom and the top, but it's just basically enough for ventilation more than anything
Yeah,
else.
well,
It's not-
partly for that, and then if you look at the Paul River one,
Right.
Um,
Yeah, it's a much more open concept.
Yeah.
It was done
But
very.
we may need
expensive.
something to protect the rain given around here.
Yeah,
but if,
exactly.
you know,
So we need to.
They don't make
walk that
translucent
line.
mud walls, but
Yeah.
some way to
And
build
I
some of
should
that
stress
in.
the fact,
Yeah.
people have this idea that cob is kind of a casual, cob isn't, you know, they've been using it for centuries. It's an extremely resilient and durable.
Well, one of the mud girls, Jen Gobby, lives on Muskeeter, she did, I don't know, I think she still does. But she was on Isles Trust Council with me, and she,
Oh, great.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it was interesting to talk with her.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to Maureen now and then to Gary.
Oh, I just have one more, next
Oh, sorry.
steps. I'm assuming next steps will just be a staff report to approve the partnership agreement and the application to TransLink for the funding. And
I
that
think we're probably gonna need a motion to,
refer to staff.
yeah,
Yeah.
for the staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maureen?
I'm really pleased to see this come forward, Dave. I know that it's been in the works for a while.
3 years.
Yeah,
Wow.
and the alignment with the sustainability touring and its emphasis on alternative building, I think, is terrific. I am, though, trying to imagine what it will be like down there. If the framing and the foundations, remind me of the schedule for that? You would be
The
doing that in
framing
the
and
spring?
the foundation is scheduled, the bus, like the pull-in, and the foundation is supposed to go in the spring of next year. So as soon as that's in place, we would do the foundation work. And then what the community would be involved in is actually building the walls and the bench. And I will admit that that is likely to be, for a short term, a messy process.
But, I mean, what I was thinking is it's probably going to coincide with a larger messy process, given the work that has to be done down.
Right.
Yeah, so, short-term pain. Finishing it off in August makes me a little worried. I know it's good timing with the sustainability tour, but it's also the height of our tourism season.
Mhm.
Given all that, I still support it. One of my questions was about maintenance. How do you maintain a Cobb bus shelter?
Basically, it requires almost no maintenance. That's the value of it. The Powell River one apparently was built a number of years ago, and there hasn't been any need for it. So I would presume that, you know, the primary maintenance is actually going to be the frame and the roof, if, you know, to the extent that and it will be designed to be as, you know, weather resistant as possible.
And would the roof be sympathetic with the Co-Commons and the library, or what kind of roof were you imagining?
I think that's up to us. We're imagining basically something very simple, which would be sloped in one direction to let the rain run off. But, you know, there's been some suggestion that we could actually have a garden and grow plants on top of it if we wanted to do that. I think.
We're gonna have a goat
Probably.
too?
No, I don't think I think for the time being, I think we're gonna go simple. So.
Okay, thank you.
You can be surprised by it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gary?
Well, I think it's fantastic, Dave, and I think it ticks so many boxes, collaboration, community involvement, the organic materials that are going into it, the whole thing. I see it as a piece of art, which I think is gonna be fantastic outside the Cove Commons. I don't think you're gonna have any problem getting local contractors to come and help you with the framing. As far as the public, as far as the public is concerned, be careful what you wish for. There's gonna be probably 100 or 200 people down there all wanting to be involved with this. I think it's gonna be fantastic.
That's
I think
actually
it's
gonna be
gonna
our largest challenge.
Yeah.
Is to manage the
Yes,
number of people that
absolutely
are
correct.
gonna be wanting to
I think it's great. I love the idea of solar. Solar isn't expensive anymore and it's extremely efficient. And if we can put that into it, that's just icing on the cake. As far as the tourist thing in the summer is concerned, I think they'd be extremely interested in the project. So I think it's just a win-win all the way around. Thank you.
Well, do you have a motion that we could ask to move this along?
Yes, I believe it be most appropriate for council to make a motion that council instructs staff to bring forward a report and recommendation for the installation of the the
Call
call bus shelter on Gardena Road, on the proposed call bus shelter.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, and seconded. Can I just call the questions if you want to move along? All in favor? Carried, passed unanimously.
Awesome. Thanks.
Good,
You
thanks,
good?
Dave. There, we're off and running. Thank you very much. Okay, Judy. Health clinic, first reading.
Morning.
Morning.
So you will recall that back in April, when the Bowen Island Health Center Foundation came forward and was looking at working with the municipality to obtain a lease agreement for the property on the road, that council at that time directed staff that once we had confirmation of the charitable status being received by the CRA, that we would move forward with a number of initiatives, and one of them was that we would move forward with an amendment to the Village Commercial 1 zone to actually clarify that a medical clinic would be a permitted use on the property. So this is simply a text amendment that would apply to the, that's just the council direction, which I talked about, to the VC1 zone. The VC1 zone is a little bit bigger than the proposed site. It applies to the southern portion of Lot 3 of the community lands on Miller Road, and as well to properties along the south side of Bowen Island Trunk Road. But as a text amendment, this would just be an additional permitted use of medical clinic. None of the other regulations would change, with the exception that we would ensure that there would be a parking standard applied to it, which is essentially consistent with the parking standard that would apply for offices and restaurants and retail and the other uses, which would be one space for 40 square meters of floor area. So the recommendation in front of you is is that bylaw number 468, 2018, which is be read a first time and be referred to the usual Islands Trust, the Advisory Planning Commission, Metro Parks, and Planning Departments, and that we would report back.
Okay, can I have a motion for that? That effect, moved and seconded? Okay, any questions for Judy before we call the question?
Was there any appetite or discussion of reducing the parking requirement?
I think on the property for the proposed health center, I think we're able to find sufficient parking, and I can, in the report this afternoon, we can review that. And in my experience in working with such facilities in other municipalities, I think that medical clinics do require that amount of parking. You have people coming for appointments, you have people waiting for appointments, you have staff. So I don't think that reducing parking would be advisable on that type of use.
Okay. So all in favor? And that's passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Just speaking up the pace a little bit here.
That might have been 15 minutes.
Okay, next up we have Daniel. Business licensing, oh, my favorite.
Quick as you need to take a look at this. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you. So we're talking about business license bylaw, so bylaw 465. So I just have some background. So 2004, when Bowen Island last talked about business licensing bylaws, so a motion to direct staff to develop a bylaw. Never brought forward under this council. In July of 2016, council directed the EDC to review business license feasibility. The EDCs started a task force, and they reported back in November of 2017. So they presented a report to council recommending business licensing. And then July of this year, staff then brought a report and a bylaw, and council granted first reading to that bylaw. So bylaw 465, what's in the bylaw? So in the proposed bylaw, every business on board would be required to obtain a business license and to renew those licenses annually. So to acquire a business license, there's steps so businesses would show compliance with the land use bylaw, with other applicable Bowen Island bylaws, and any letters or certificates of approval from the appropriate authorities. And I should include the definition there. What is a business? So in the bylaw, business is the carrying on of an undertaking of any kind or nature for the purposes of gain or profit. And this is not super readable, it's essentially the things that we exempt from requiring a business license. So things like garage sales or buskers, fundraising activities, what else we talked about? Utilities, performance, concert, exhibition, entertainment for a charity purpose, or in a location where the operator already holds a license. The renting of single-family dwellings, secondary suites, duplexes, or rooms, and so that was proposed as sort of a, phase 2 consideration, is being a landlord essentially without a business. So it's proposed currently to be exempt. Non-resident business, doing things like bringing goods to another business within the municipality. And then down here, a person who pays a user fee to a farmer's market organization to participate in a farmer's market. And then, so part of the directive from council and the EDC was essentially try to keep the categories limited and the fees low and straightforward. So some municipalities, when you look at their bylaws, they end up with these great massive schedules of how you calculate exactly what business you fall under and how that relates to what fee you pay and how big is your business and number of it and all this stuff. And so essentially, instead what we propose is, in essence, most things would either be a commercial business, and what you think of like a storefront would be a commercial business, it'd be $125. If you run a bed and breakfast, you're the $100 category. If you're a contractor, so you are based on Bowen, you're doing work across the island, you're a contractor, or you're a non-resident business. This would be if you're somebody who is off island and coming on to Bowen to do similar things to that. And then we have a home-based business in 2 categories broken out to, if you have public access, and we define that as regular business hours open to the public. So if you're running business out of your home and people are coming on a regular basis, you're open for the public can come. You'd be in that category versus if you're a home-based business with non-public access. So you don't have regular business hours, you're operating out of your house, you essentially have a lesser fee to go with that. So the finance committee discussed it over email. Would say from the finance committee members. So we had a meeting scheduled, I think, for this last Monday, but it got postponed. So we did it over email to bring comment back to council. Mixed support.